Vice Chancellor, since you've joined Aston, you have conducted many different engagement activities with staff and other stakeholders, including town hall meetings and walkabouts. What observations would you make about Aston University as a result of these engagement activities?
I've had plenty of opportunities over the last few weeks to get out and about on the campus, have town halls with staff, question and answer sessions, and meeting most of the groups, both schools and some of the support areas within the university. I've experienced a great diversity of groups. I've experienced different, I suppose I'd say, facilities in terms of some parts of our buildings and estates which have been recently refurbished and other parts which are due for that change. But what I've found consistently amongst staff is people who are very proud of the institution, very proud of the work that they're doing, the contribution that they are making and have made to Aston being a very successful place. Certainly in the Q&A, in the question and answers that I've had to staff in fora, there have been questions and issues that have been raised with regard to both the current operations and the future of the university. But I haven't found, let me say, a strong, consistent theme of concern. I've found in some sense some small and isolated areas of concern amongst, I think it's fair to say, a general sentiment of confidence and pride and enthusiasm for the opportunities the university faces.
In your first video to staff, you talked a lot about the strengths of Aston University, and rather than asking you to repeat them here, what do you think the threats are to the continued progress and success of Aston?
I think Aston has been very successful in some very obvious ways. We've seen increase in students, that's led to an increase in revenue. We've seen increases in our performance in rankings like the National Student Survey. That in turn has fed back into, let me say, greater reputational standing for the university and higher student preferences. So there are a lot of positive things coming on. In terms of the threats, I think it's fair to say that the growth the very strong growth that Aston has experienced in the last few years probably can't be sustained just by taking in more and more students each year. We need to work out how do we grow the revenue of this university by diversifying in terms of our offers and our mix of students so that we have other means to grow our revenue rather than just relying on bringing in more and more students all the time. In that regard, one of the opportunities we will have to identify is how to bring in more international students. And in that context, I think we face quite a challenging environment at the moment because, unfortunately, the government has indicated a desire to, let me say, make it more difficult for international students to come to the UK because of their concerns about immigration. So in terms of challenges that we face, we do need to work out how to bring in more revenue year on year. As I said, relying on domestic students for growth can't be our sole strategy. Diversifying and particularly international students is part of the answer, but as I said, I'm concerned at the moment that will be a challenge for us based on current government policy and visa restrictions.
Alec, I mean, thank you for that. I mean, we've clearly as a university been very successful in our undergraduate recruitment.
Sure.
We're slightly beneath where we ought to be, probably, or would want to be in the marketplace for postgraduate recruitment.
Yep.
Have you any thoughts on that and what we could do to rectify that and improve the situation?
When I talk about the fact that we've been, in my view, almost solely reliant on domestic students for growth, it has been primarily domestic undergraduate students. Now, as I said, we've been very successful in that market and we're very proud of the fact that we've had more domestic undergraduate students who want to come to Aston. But it is the most regulated part of the market. It is in some sense the part where the government sets the fee. We don't have the ability in some sense to grow revenue in that area other than by bringing in more students. We are underrepresented in terms of our student mix, both for international students but also for postgraduate taught students, both domestically and internationally. This is an area where we've seen an improvement, an increase at Aston this year. We've actually been very successful in our recruitment of postgraduate taught students, but it's an area that we continue to need to grow. It's an area where we are still, compared to our peer universities, overly reliant on one market segment, which is domestic undergraduate students, and postgraduate taught programs need to be an area that will grow for us as a share of Aston students.
Do you see there's potentially an opportunity in online distance learning? I mean, it's not a space we're particularly well represented in, but as a marketplace, it's growing like crazy across the world.
I think in addressing the postgraduate taught market, we need to recognise that online education is a very important growth opportunity and factor in that regard. So if we look at where most of the postgraduate taught growth is coming from globally, there is still increasing mobility of students who are moving from country to country internationally to access that. But in most domestic markets, it's online that represents the biggest growth opportunities. And I think it's a really valuable area for Aston to look carefully at, because I think one of the things that has differentiated us as a university is that we've provided opportunity for students to come to this university because of its location, because of its ethos, and provide that opportunity for students who otherwise may not have been able to access higher education. In the postgraduate taught space, which is usually about students who, in some sense, not full-time students, they've got jobs, they've got families, they've got other responsibilities, the opportunity for many of them to come and access postgraduate on-campus education is very limited. The ability, on the other hand, to access education online opens up that opportunity for many students who otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity for ongoing education. So I think for Aston in particular, trying to grow its postgraduate taught space at the same time as providing opportunities and access for groups that otherwise would have trouble accessing postgraduate education, I think online is something we will need to and are looking at very closely.